This is SBS World News with Lilin Chin.
Good evening. In the past hour, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has touched down in Singapore ahead of a historic summit with the US president. Donald Trump is on board Air Force One and is expected to arrive later tonight. He has declared this a one-time shot at peace. Our chief political correspondent, Brett Mason, is in Singapore, and our reporter, Hannah Sinclair, is in Seoul tonight.
What's their reaction been to Kim Jong-un's arrival here in Singapore this evening?
Well, Brett, we've spoken to people here in Seoul and there's really a cautious optimism about this summit and people are really hoping that it goes well. Just last night, hundreds of people gathered outside the US Embassy here in Seoul. They're really wishing that this meeting succeeds. They're hoping for peace on the Korean Peninsula and that this meeting could actually lead to change. SBS has spoken to a North Korean defector, Ji Song-ho. He caught the attention of Donald Trump earlier this year. He was singled out during Donald Trump's State of the Union address. Mr. Ji survived starvation and torture in North Korea, and he's told me that the issue of North Korea's human rights abuses, which appear to have been sidelined in the lead up to this summit, can't be left off the table. Ji Song-ho keeps the crutches his father made him as a boy close by. They've become a symbol of perseverance and of Mr. Ji's extraordinary escape from the North Korean regime.
정말 수많은 사람들이 굶어 죽고 또한 저희들 굶어 죽기까지 이제 갔었는데.
During a famine in the north in the 1990s, the then 13-year-old fainted from exhaustion trying to steal coal from a train. He passed out and woke to find a train had run over his limbs. North Korean doctors weren't forgiving.
네, 정말 수술용 메스로 가위를 살을 이제 베어내던 그 느낌과 톱으로 이제 정말 뼈를 이제 다리에 뼈를 이제 썰던 그 고통들이 지금도 이제 생각하면 생생하고요.
An illegal trip to China saw Mr. Ji tortured by North Korean secret police. He eventually defected to the south after a treacherous journey through the last jungle and now works as a human rights advocate in Seoul. The miraculous tale caught the attention of US President Donald Trump, who singled Mr. Ji out in his State of the Union address earlier this year. Yes. After stepping foot in the Oval Office himself, Mr. Ji is confident North Korea's human rights abuses won't be left off the agenda at the meeting between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un.
저는 이제 믿음이 있고요. 그러니까 북한 인권에 대한 트럼프 대통령과 이제 펜스 부대통령님의 그 의지를 이제 보았기 때문에 저는 그렇게 확신하고 있는데요.
Even if deals are made in Singapore, this defector believes Kim Jong-un's days as a dictator are numbered.
그 북한의 이제 지도자를 계속 이제 두고 가지 않을 거기 때문에 북한에서도 민주주의 시스템의 이제 선거가 일어날 것이고 김정은이 계속해서 그런 이제 정치를 할 수가 없을 거예요.
Hoping for change after enduring so much. So, Brett, there's a sense of relative calm here on the streets of Seoul. Analysts are warning against any deals being rushed into because they could have a big impact here on the Korean Peninsula, especially as the motivations of both Kim Jong-un and President Trump leading into this meeting remain unclear. Brett?
Let's cross now to Hannah Sinclair in Seoul. Hannah, the aftermath of the summit could deeply affect South Korea's security and government. What concerns are being raised there?
Indeed, Janice. Well, President Moon has really staked his presidency on improving relations with the North. He wants this summit to go well. In fact, if it doesn't, it could have a big impact on his government. Local elections are being held here on Wednesday, the day after the summit. Also closely watching these movements are displaced Koreans. We travelled 2.5 hours northwest of Seoul to gauge their opinion on events. From the serene shores of Kyeodong Island, North Korea is less than 3 kilometres away. A unique view for those wanting a peek at the totalitarian state that has been at war with the South for more than 65 years. The island's proximity to the north is why Cho Byung-yo lives here. The 87-year-old fought in the Korean War and has been displaced ever since. He thinks reunification is a long way off, but like many on this island, hopes the meeting between Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump could result in a deal that lets him travel freely to his homeland.
못 가는 심정이 우리 뭐 특히나 이 가족의 그 생일이라든지 또 우리나라에 이제 명절이 있습니다. 뭐 어느 나라라 다 그 있지만은 그런 때는 특히 그 생각이 나고.
Despite a flurry of recent inter-Korean diplomacy, South Koreans have felt the brunt of the North's unpredictability. The last ballistic missile launch on the peninsula was just 7 months ago. Despite these markets being so close to North Korea, the mood here is quite relaxed. The Singapore summit is on people's minds, but they're expressing hope more than fear.
확실히 북미 정상회담을 앞두고 그 전보다 사람들이 희망을 가지고 있는 것 같고 통일에 대한 기대감도 있고 표정들이 되게 밝아진 것 같아서 저도 기분 되게 좋아요.
Many open to the idea of the summit as a stepping stone.
If they trust each other, I think it could be a very honorable meeting for each other, for North Korea or South Korea or like the other nations that are helping our nations.
So it could be a good first step.
Yeah, it could be a good first step.
Analysts remain sceptical about prospects of denuclearisation in the north. Missile expert Tae-woo Kim advises the South Korean and US military and has warned against rushing into any details that could jeopardise security in the south.
They have numerous underground tunnels and they have numerous facilities in all over their territory. It is technically impossible to search them within a short period.
More than 28,000 American troops remain on the peninsula. Their recent joint drills with South Korean troops angering Kim Jong-un.
So we should do both. Talking with North Korea and preparing against the worst case scenario.
Bracing for the outcome of tomorrow's historic meeting. So there's really a sense of anticipation here on the streets of Seoul. We're expecting people to really be tuning in tomorrow, watching these events closely. They're going about their business for now, but we are expecting them to really be watching these historic events and wondering what it will mean for them and safety and security here on the Korean Peninsula. Janice?
And the eyes of the world will be watching, of course. Thanks so much, Hannah Sinclair in Seoul. And of course, Brett Mason joining us from Singapore. Well, the 50 million people in South Korea have been living under the threat of imminent attack from North Korea for 70 years. Hannah Sinclair is near the demilitarised zone separating the countries. Hannah, what can you tell us from there?
Well, Janice, you can see North Korea behind me across the water there, just 2 kilometres away. Here in the south today, there was actually a bit of a sense of relief as the summit got underway. People were optimistic that it would go well. They were hoping for a good outcome. But as the day wore on South Korean social media, we were seeing a little bit of questioning and a little bit of disappointment. What's really been achieved here? North Korea is known for its human rights violations. The UN says the North Korean people live under shocking conditions, and so many people here in the south remain separated from their families after decades of tension and conflict. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un's diplomatic courtship has been full of twists and turns, and no country is watching that courtship more closely than South Korea. At President Moon Jae-in's official residence, he and his cabinet ministers delayed their weekly meeting to view live images from Singapore. President Moon confessed he'd had a sleepless night.
I, along with all our people, sincerely hope it will be a successful summit that will open a new era of complete denuclearization, peace, and a new relationship between South Korea, North Korea, and the United States.
At Seoul's main train station, TV screens broadcast images of the Singapore summit.
As the world's media is reporting on this event, where the two sides are confirming their positions, it'll be difficult for them not to implement what they've agreed.
Now that North Korea appears to be willing to have dialogue and open its country, I believe it will lead to more exchanges and a positive opening.
Despite deep-rooted mistrust of the motive of North Korea and concerns about US President Donald Trump putting his relationship with the North ahead of the South, people here really felt the historic nature of this moment, shouting "wow," "unbelievable" and "good job" at the screens. North Korea's closest ally, China, welcomed the meeting between the two leaders, praising them for creating a new history.
We hope the two countries' highest leaders can dispel interference, establish mutual trust, overcome difficulties and reach a basic consensus on promoting and achieving the denuclearisation of the peninsula.
The country most sceptical about the summit is arguably Japan. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe spent today hosting his Malaysian counterpart, but was closely following developments in Singapore.
I wish this summit success, and I hope it brings progress to the issue of nuclear missiles, and especially the abductions.
Shinzo Abe has met Donald Trump twice in the past few months to raise the issue of Japanese citizens abducted by North Korea in the 1970s and 80s. He also wants any deal forged between the US president and the North Korean leader to address Japan's security concerns.
The Japanese are worried about Donald Trump not giving away, not just agreeing to intercontinental ballistic missiles being taken off the table. They want medium and short-range missiles taken off too, because they're the things that threaten Japan.
In North Korea, the country's main newspaper splashed images of Kim Jong-un on the streets of Singapore. The regime usually takes days to report news. Clearly, Kim Jong-un wants his people to know about the summit and the international legitimacy he's gained. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will travel to Seoul to meet with the foreign ministers of South Korea and Japan. He will also hold talks with President Moon in coming days.
Thanks so much, Hannah Sinclair, joining us there from right near the DMZ.